It's great to be here at the App Promo Summit again. My name is Dave Bell. I'm the CEO of Gummicube. And today we're going to talk about ASO strategies and A/B testing now and in 2022. To start, we want to make sure that everyone's testing to have the biggest impact with App Store optimization. We're going to talk about some common mistakes and traps that we've seen people falling into and making over the last year. We'll discuss the pros and cons of each testing method that's out there, and there are a few of them. And we'll also look at iOS 15 and the new era of A/B testing that is upon us now with Apple releasing their exciting new A/B testing features and platform. First, I think it's important to remember that ASO needs to have a broad impact to be successful, and it really does touch every aspect of your user acquisition. We look at it as a foundational element of user acquisition, and we think of it as a holistic process that really determines the success or failure of most apps. The cost of user acquisition is impacted by what you do on ASO, particularly when you look at your store listing conversion rates. Store rankings are impacted by what you do from an A/B testing and ASO standpoint, because conversion within search determines your ultimate ranking. Your relevancy is determined by ASO. When you're thinking about running an Apple search ads campaign, you want a greater share of voice. A big part of that is what you do from a store listing perspective. And of course, browse-based store merchandising has now been impacted by ASO, as when you look at many lists that are featured throughout the App Store and Play Store, Apple and Google are measuring conversion rates. When we think about ASO, we want to make sure that the success of ASO gets you to the last mile, where you have to spend the least amount of money to get the maximum amount of results and scale in your marketing campaigns. We also think it's important to note that optimization is not pay to play. I think there are a lot of relationships between store ads and organic, but fundamentally ASO really never should be treated as a pay to play effort. I think a lot of people, particularly a lot of UA agencies, promote Apple search ads as a single lever ASO strategy, and we feel this is costly and misguided. Functional ASO should reduce your cost of user acquisition, not increase it. And when we look at kind of ASO, it's kind of like the foundation of your app marketing house. When you use a single lever paid strategy, like simply running Apple search ads without properly optimizing, it's kind of like cheating on a test or building a house without a foundation. And everything just becomes more expensive out down the road when you don't do things the right way up front. We also believe optimizing is different for each channel. There are a few different ways of breaking channels apart. In our world, we look at channels within the store, like browse and explore traffic versus search traffic. And we think of it that way because each channel has a different user experience or user journey. Browse-based traffic inside the store typically has a two-click experience where they're looking at different features in the store. They click a banner for your app and they land on your store listing. There's less intent within browse traffic than there is search traffic. So behaviorally, it's different. About 70% of store impressions today are generated from people who are just browsing the store, but only 30% of downloads. Conversion is generally much lower when it comes to browse traffic, which is one of the reasons why you need to measure browse and search separately, because at the end of the day, a blended metric for organic really doesn't work, because browse traffic can be very volatile in terms of the number of impressions and much lower in conversion rate than traffic that comes from search. When you look at search traffic, well, when users behave differently as they're searching. They're scrolling the App Store almost like they're scrolling Instagram, and they have the ability to download directly from the search result, particularly in the Apple App Store, which can change the way that users are making decisions about which app to download. Conversion on each keyword is actually what determines your potential traffic, because conversion on each keyword impacts your keyword ranking. I feel like a lot of people focus on conversion optimization for the store listing. And while that is important, at the end of the day, your store listing conversion rate is not ultimately what determines your search rankings and how you appear in browse traffic throughout the store. There are a lot of analogies that we have for paid UA channels, but when we think about user behavior in paid UA channels, user behavior, of course, within Apple search ads and Google ads, most closely resembles search-based user behavior in the App Store and Play Store because it's high intent. compared to other channels. Facebook is somewhere in the middle, followed by platforms and channels like Instagram and TikTok and Snapchat, where it's much more influencer driven and there's less upfront user intention in terms of what you might expect from a conversion standpoint within the channel. Now, there are a lot of mistakes and traps that we hear about when we're interacting with customers on a day-to-day basis from an A/B testing standpoint. The first thing is it's really important to have a plan for what you want to A/B test. And there's a big difference between a dream and a plan. Everyone wants to be able to go out and say, well, I have a goal of increasing conversion by X%, and I need that to happen by a certain period of time. But in reality, it's the plan that's going to make that possible, not just the desire. Having big changes to your screenshots, throwing a lot of spaghetti against the wall rapidly, isn't usually what results in long-term sustained success. Yes, if you're experimenting with different layouts and try something radically new, once in a while you're going to hit on something that really works well. But there's more quantitative process that can lead to more consistent results from an A/B testing standpoint. One, you want to evaluate the market and understand which elements are working among your peers and in your category. No two apps are ever going to be the same, but understanding how consumers behave and what they convert on as they're browsing the store is really, really important from a research perspective. We want to make sure that A/B testing is iterative and we're changing elements in a controlled environment so that when something works, we know why it works and how it works so that we can replicate that and isolate elements that are positively impacting the user journey for our application. I think at the end of the day, plans make dreams real, right? And you've got to make a plan or ultimately you're just dreaming. Everyone wants to say, hey, I have a goal of improving conversion 10 or 20%, but the plan makes that a reality. I also think that in terms of pitfalls that people often see, traffic distribution is a really important topic to pay attention to, because a lot of people will complain that when they run an A/B test and they ultimately deploy it in the App Store or Google Play, the results didn't look the same afterwards. And there are a number of reasons this could occur. Number one, how long did you run the test? And when did you ultimately deploy that test? Did you not only get a significant sample size of traffic, but a significant sample size across a period of time that's representative of trends in user acquisition for your app? Traffic on Monday or Tuesday or Wednesday might not resemble user behavior on Saturday or Sunday, depending on the category that you're in the store. The timing that you run a test can also be important throughout the year. Every category has unique seasonality. That seasonality impacts demand and user behavior in the store and the type of features that people are looking for. Traffic in October might not behave like traffic in November because the holiday season is kicking in. And so it's important to remember that A/B testing is as much about measuring conversion as it is understanding what we might have to merchandise over time to make our app successful on a seasonal basis. The other thing that I think is very important, because I know a lot of people run A/B testing on platforms outside of the App Store and Google Play, is you have to evaluate what traffic you ran for that A/B test. And if it came from outside the App Store, did it really represent a majority of your total traffic? At the end of the day, there's no Facebook audience or social audience that can be aggregated that simulates the organic audience in the store, because the organic audience in the App Store and Play Store has a different user journey than simply seeing your store listing and an ad. They're browsing the store. They're scrolling like Instagram on the search results in the store. They're making choices for you versus a competitor. And so tuning an A/B testing process is not just about audience. It's also about experience that user is having as they go through their journey to download your app. Ultimately, if you have a majority of your traffic to your app coming from Facebook and you're running an A/B test using Facebook traffic in a planned audience, that might be representative of the real world results when you deploy that in the store. However, at the end of the day, if your majority of your traffic comes from organic in the store, you probably aren't going to see the same results when you deploy that test. And that's why it's important to consider traffic sources and the best way to A/B test depending upon the problem that you're trying to solve. The other reason people typically see challenges with the results of a test when they deploy it versus when they're testing different assets are external variables. And you have to balance these out as you're measuring tests. Has there been an update to the app? Were there other assets that you weren't testing that changed in that user journey or on your store listing? And was there any change in your primary traffic sources? If you're running an A/B test and 50% of your traffic comes from Facebook, and then when you deploy that A/B test, you cut back on a marketing campaign and only 20% of your traffic is coming from Facebook, you're going to see different results because the traffic source has changed. It's also important to understand whether featured placements in the store were present while you were testing or after you deploy. If you get featured by Apple or Google, you're going to see a huge spike in impressions. And if you look at organic as a total basket, that will decrease your overall conversion across organics in the store. So it's important to measure search and browse separately. And it's also important to take into consideration if there were any changes to the volume of impressions during, before, and after a test as you measure, so you can isolate those external variables. And also, it's important to look at whether your search ranking changed before and after a test while you're running that measurement process. Now, there are a number of ways to run A/B testing and pros and cons to these methods. Number one, Google Experiments ultimately is a very good platform if you're trying to A/B test the store listing. All of the users who get exposed to Google Play Experiments test have to land on your store listing before they ultimately download. And it's a good cross-section opportunity to run a test across all of your traffic channels. The challenge with a Google Play experiment is it can't distinguish between paid organic channels. Ultimately, it doesn't necessarily represent what Apple users, experience as they're browsing the App Store. So a successful Google Play experiment doesn't mean it will be successful if it translates to the Apple App Store. And it's important to look at still things like, did impression volume change? Did your channel mix change? Are you going into a seasonally high or low period before or after you deploy a test? And was there a feature that occurred? All of those things should be part of a measurement process when you ultimately deploy a successful experiment. Next, we look at Apple Search Ads creative set testing. It's a great A/B testing tool within Apple Search Ads. It allows for simultaneous multivariate testing of different creative sets as they appear in the search result, which helps you boost organic conversion within search. Now, the cons of ASA creative set testing is that it does require budget. But if we had to tell a client where they should invest their money A/B testing, if their primary concern is improving organic search rankings or boosting organic conversion within the Apple App Store, this is one of the best platforms to use for A/B testing. Finally, you have external testing platforms. We have a platform called Splitcube. There are others. And because we operate a platform like this, we know its advantages and its disadvantages, and we're not afraid to talk about them. Number one, if you're running paid user acquisition and you want to optimize a particular paid channel for conversion, this is a great platform for that, and platforms like it, because you're able to isolate that channel and you're able to measure how that one particular channel converts. The challenge is paid and organic traffic are not representative. And it's not just about how well you tune the audience of traffic that you're sending to the page. It's because users don't experience the same journey across paid and organic. So think of external testing tools as good ways to tune up paid marketing and understanding what will help your paid user acquisition channels convert better, but not necessarily representative of all traffic that hits a page, because those users are seeing different journeys. Now, iOS, as we all know, is going to have some great A/B testing capabilities baked in over the next few months. So we just want to touch on this because we think it's important. We're going to talk a little bit about how GummyCube is going to be using iOS 15 testing with our customers. Now, number one, product page optimization is an awesome feature that Apple's rolling out. You'll be able to have A/B testing on the actual product page, test different icons, screenshots, and app previews, and compare performance between versions. Now, of course, there are some important guidelines to consider, limiting the number of creative assets that you're going to test so you can effectively measure different variants, and make sure that you remember alternate metadata still needs to be submitted for review. That's not something where we believe you're going to be able to do on-the-fly testing. Apple's going to let us test up to 3 different treatments alongside the original product page, and these tests can run for up to 90 days. They can be fully localized for different territories and languages, and we can, of course, choose the percentage of users that see the treatment versus the default page. From a creative standpoint, icons must be uploaded into the binary of the published app. That's something important that a lot of people, I think, don't remember or don't realize as part of this process that's important. And of course, screenshots and app preview videos can be submitted for independent review through a new app version. From an ASO standpoint, the impact is going to be measurable. You're going to have native A/B testing in the store. You're going to be able to understand how different sources of traffic convert as part of an A/B test, and you're going to be able to measure across impressions, downloads, and engagement across the store, which is going to be hugely valuable. Now, when we think of the variables that you're going to be able to test, screenshots and video are an important variable. Icons are an important variable. And all of these things we're going to be able to A/B test as part of iOS 15. And we're going to look at different themes. We're going to look at gameplay if you have a game. We're going to look at genre. We're going to look at brand and how we can leverage that as part of A/B testing. We're also going to really leverage the larger space that's available to give users a better idea of the kind of product or game that they're going to be interacting with. From an icon standpoint, we're going to really leverage this opportunity to understand how can we get better conversion in a search result, as well as on a product page with your icons. And I think that's very important as well. When we think about user flow for iOS 15 testing, we're looking at this on a channel-to-channel basis from a measurement standpoint. How does search perform? How does browse perform? How does app refer or web refer perform? And we want to make sure that ultimately we're measuring that across each variant so we understand if there are any differences in how users respond to a test. When we look at icon testing, we're looking at a number of different things from a product page standpoint with iOS 15. We're looking at what colors or what characters can we have inside an icon? What backgrounds will we have? Does something busier or less busy work? Is it brand focused or is it feature focused? All these things are important because the icon is not just an element that appears on a product page, it's an element that people see in the search result and can cause them to stop and download your app while they're browsing the App Store. From a screenshot and video standpoint, they don't necessarily need to be included within a build for approval. However, all tested assets still need to be compliant with iOS guidelines. Developers, I think, need to prepare for a number of scenarios to map out testing, thinking about composition changes, copy changes. What are we going to focus on, whether from a feature or character perspective? And of course, how do we want to adjust positioning and how do we want to prioritize features inside of our assets? All of these things are aspects that we want to consider as part of iOS 15 testing. The other thing that Apple's giving us is custom product pages, which is the ability to have literally different pages that users land on from different channels. Now, at the end of the day, we know that users behave differently depending on what you're marketing in a channel, what your creative assets look like, and the user experience they're coming in from in the channel that you're advertising in. Now, we can look at scenarios where you can potentially have campaigns focusing on different features of your app and give users different experiences based on those features that you're marketing when they land in the store, which is incredible opportunity to boost conversion for your marketing. There are a lot of important performance metrics that we're going to be able to track, from impressions to downloads to conversion rate within custom product pages. But one thing that you're not going to be able to do is A/B test the same way that you do your primary page. Our understanding is that A/B testing is going to exist on the primary store listing, and custom product pages will be an offshoot of that. A custom product page is fully localizable. It's tied to a specific unique URL from a measurement standpoint. And as I said, you can have up to 35 custom product pages at a time. You have promotional text, which is limited to 170 characters. And of course, you have customary 3 preview videos and up to 10 screenshots, just like you would a normal store listing. And of course, the impact on ASO is significant because at the end of the day, we now have the ability to optimize on a per channel basis, which is exciting. And finally, just some wrap-up strategies to run effective tests. Keep in mind, it's important for you to know the traffic source of the platform that you're testing, that not all traffic is created equal, and to understand the limitations of the testing environments you use. If you're using a testing environment inside the store, you're getting a great view of how conversion might look for organic users or for a cross-section of your paid traffic. If you're testing outside of the store using a platform like Splitcube, it's important to understand what you're really doing as you're testing conversion for the paid channel that you're using to drive traffic in. It's important to run iterative tests. We don't want to just throw spaghetti against the wall and simply make big changes. We want to make sure that we're able to measure what we're changing and how it affects the test and ultimately the results. And we want to make sure that we understand our strengths across organic and paid. We can use ASO software to determine what keywords were discovered from and also what features have the most organic demand. We can use technology to understand what our competitors have A/B tested in the past and what worked, and we can build a solid thesis for our A/B testing. At the end of the day, ASO is critical to both make organic perform in the store and to make UA campaigns more efficient. And Apple's giving us some pretty incredible tools to do that on the App Store, perhaps even better than what Google has currently on the Google Play Store. And there are many channels available for A/B testing depending on what you want to test, whether we're looking at a cross-section of traffic on the store listing, optimizing paid traffic, or optimizing the organic journey for end users. And understanding the nature of these channels, understanding the nature of those different user behaviors, and how different A/B testing platforms work can make the difference between a successful or a detrimental deployment when you launch the next version of your app. Thanks for joining the session. Really excited to be here. You can reach us at info@gummicube.com, follow us at Twitter @gummicube or LinkedIn @gummicube, or you can always send me an email at dave@gummicube.com if you have any questions. It's been great chatting. See you soon.